Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca from Access Books. I want to give a big thank you to Compton Unified for sponsoring this Zoom meeting today. We are so fortunate and so lucky to be able to spend a few moments this morning with Stuart Gibbs. As many of you know, he's written multiple series, mine being favorite, The Spy Schools. And he's going to talk to you today about writing and creating stories. And we have questions that you have given us, and he's going to also answer those questions. So we're going to pass it off to wonderful Mr. Gibbs.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm happy I could join you this morning. Sorry that due to the pandemic, you can't be in person. I actually don't live too far from Compton, so maybe someday soon I will actually be able to visit your schools in person. But this does allow me to talk to a lot of different schools at the same time. So now, if I came to your school, I would do a presentation. I would show you some of the pictures I'm going to show you. I get to talk to you. I get to ask you guys questions. I can't make this quite as interactive as I used to, but hopefully you guys like this, and so we'll go through the presentation here, and then I'll take some questions that you guys have. So to start out, I'm just going to put my hold on one second here. I'm gonna put up my this is the book I have that just came out the most recently, Spy School Revolution. But as you heard, I do several series. I'm going to give you a very quick run through the series I do, starting with the Fun Jungle series, which is a mystery series that's set in a zoo, not a normal zoo. It's like a theme park zoo. Like somebody took Disneyland and combined it with the LA Zoo and created this huge new tourist attraction people are coming from all over the world to see. But things go wrong at Fun Jungle. There are several mysteries involving animals that a kid named Teddy Fitzroy gets involved solving. So they're in Belly Up, there's a murdered hippo. In Poach, there's a stolen koala. In Big Game, someone's trying to kill one of the endangered rhinos. In Pandemonium, an endangered panda vanishes mysteriously en route to Fun Jungle. In Lying Down, a mountain lion is framed for murder, and in Tyrannosaurus Rex, a Tyrannosaurus skeleton, a very valuable skeleton, is stolen from a top secret dig. I also do the Moonbase Alpha series, which is it's also a mystery series, but very different in that this one takes place on the moon. It takes place on the very first moon base in the year 2041, where the first people are moving to the moon. The first kids are living there and finding out that Star Wars and Star Trek and Guardians of the Galaxy have lied to all of us about how awesome space travel is going to be. And it's not so exciting to live up there. And when crimes occur, they get involved in solving them. I do the Charlie Thorne series. Actually, it's not quite a series yet, but it will be soon. Charlie Thorne is the smartest person on Earth, even though she's only a 12-year-old girl. And because of her great intellect, Charlie is pulled into a world full of danger and intrigue as she tries to track down things that the greatest thinkers from history have found but hidden. And Charlie's always up against bad guys trying to track down. And like in Charlie Thorne and the Last Equation, she's trying to beat a lot of bad guys to a very dangerous equation that Albert Einstein himself came up with. I did the Last Musketeer series, which is a time travel series where a kid goes back in time 400 years to Paris and finds out that the three musketeers that you've heard of were real people, and he unites them for their very first adventure, or series of adventures in this series. And then I do the Spy School series, which is about a kid about your age who gets recruited to the CIA's top secret Academy of Espionage. And he's very excited because he's going to get turned into a spy, but it turns out being a spy is much more dangerous and perilous than he expected. But he's a smart kid. He manages to save the day. And we're now 8 books, all these 6 books here, Spy School British Invasion, and the most recent book, as I said, Spy School Revolution. Well, that's just a quick overview of the books I do. What I'm going to do here today is talk to you about the question I get asked the most about my being a writer, which is why do I do the books I do? Why do I do something set in a spy school or on a moon base or in a theme park zoo? Where does inspiration come from? And I like to talk about this because I think a lot of the time people have a misconception about how authors write. They think that authors are just sort of walking down the street, boom, an idea comes to us and it's perfectly formed. We can just run to our computer and just start writing. And that's not true. We struggle with writing just as much as you might struggle with writing. We sometimes have to be thinking about an idea for a long time before we can ever start writing it. Not just days or weeks, but sometimes we're thinking about an idea for months or even years. So I thought I would talk to you about where some of the ideas for these book series came from. I also want to talk about one other thing. People always want to know how long have I wanted to be a writer? Did I always want to be a writer? And the answer is yes. This is a form I was given when I was in second grade. And I need to point out here that this was a horribly outdated form, even when I was a kid. Look what they did here. They divided the jobs into boys' jobs and girls' jobs, which is wrong. There's no such thing as a boy's job or a girl's job. And then look, these are the job options they gave the girls: mother, nurse, school teacher, airline hostess, model, and secretary, which maybe on their own, each one of those is not a bad job, although I would say mother is not actually a job at all. Mothers and fathers do not get paid to watch their kids. But you put all those together, and it's kind of a sexist group of jobs. Like nobody would ever, I'll give you a form like this, and I'm sure it's not news to the young girls watching today that you are not limited to these 6 or 5 real job options. You can do anything you want. But I should point out to the boys, you're not limited to these kind of 6 weird job options they give the boys either. I grew up in Texas. Not a single one of my friends became a cowboy. There's cowboy right there. There's not a whole lot of people becoming cowboy these days. But I did not see what I wanted to do. So I put author there on my form in second grade. But I really did not know how anybody became an author. I got all the way to college without knowing how anybody became an author. And I didn't even know if an author was like a full-time job. I thought maybe all authors had other jobs and wrote books on the side. And so when I got to college, I thought, well, maybe I should study something. I have a better idea of how to get a job. And so I decided to study what I liked second most after writing, which was animals. That I always liked going to the zoo. I always liked catching lizards and snakes and hiking out in the wild and looking for animals. So I decided to study to be a field biologist, which is a biologist who studies animals in the wild. Though some of them work at zoos. And when I was in college studying this, I worked at a zoo myself. I worked at the Philadelphia Zoo studying capybaras, which are the world's largest rodents. And while I was there, I got to spend a lot of time behind the scenes at the zoo, seeing how a zoo worked. And this, because I really wanted to be an author more than I wanted to be a field biologist, this sort of sparked my imagination. I started to think that a zoo was a great place to set a story. I started to play around with what different stories I could tell at a zoo, and I hit upon the idea of telling mysteries at zoo, mysteries involving the animals. But then I think, well, what animals did I want to talk about? And so I just started to go with animals that I found fascinating while I was working at the zoo, like hippos. When I started working at the zoo, I thought that I had a misconception about hippos. I thought that they were these docile, gentle animals, and that's not true. Hippos are very, very dangerous. They're very territorial. They're very aggressive. They're far more dangerous to humans than lions or leopards are in Africa. They're actually the most dangerous large land animal in Africa to humans. And I thought, man, that's an interesting animal to put at the center of a story. And I got fascinated by koalas because, frankly, everybody seemed to be fascinated by koalas. People lined up for hours to see a koala, even though a koala just sleeps in a tree all day. It's like coming to see really a cute rock. But I thought, why do people find this animal so fascinating? But those are the center of a story. I thought it was important to write about how people were hunting rhinos to death because of their horns. So I put that in the middle of the story. Everybody just loves pandas. So I decided to learn as much as I could about pandas. I wanted to write about an animal that was outside the zoo. So I decided to write about mountain lions, which you might be able to tell where this mountain lion lives. This mountain lion does not live particularly far from you. There's a mountain lion living in Griffith Park, not far from the Hollywood sign. There are actually quite a few mountain lions living around Los Angeles, but there's mountain lions living pretty much everywhere in the United States. They are the most widespread terrestrial animal on Earth after humans, and I thought that was an interesting animal to build a story around. And then I always had loved dinosaurs, so I wanted to write a story about dinosaurs. Now I realized that dinosaurs don't live in zoos. You've got to go places like the Los Angeles County Museum of Natural History to do research on them. And it was a tremendous amount of fun for me to do research on this book. Like I found one of the things I learned is that when you go to any natural history museum, only about 1% of those dinosaur bones that you see are of the museum's collection are on display for you to see. The rest of them are down in storage like this. And I really wanted to learn about that. I wanted to learn how someone could look at those bones there and decide what a dinosaur looked like, because this may be hard to believe, but just how much our idea of what a dinosaur looks like has changed even since I was your age. When I was your age, this is what we thought a Tyrannosaurus looked like, but this is what we think a Tyrannosaurus look like now. So much more colorful. It's got that weird toupee looking thing that it has there. Those are feathers. When I was a kid, nobody knew that dinosaurs would have had feathers or that birds would have descended from dinosaurs, but this is all new stuff. I love finding things out like this and working them into my stories. What I love about writing the Fun Jungle series is that when I write it, I promise you, it's not a textbook. It's not like reading a bunch of nonstop facts. There's action, adventure, and comedy and mystery in it. But when I write it, I'm not just an author. I also get to be a biologist as well. So if the Fun Jungle series was based on me working in the zoo and knowing zookeepers, the Moonbase Alpha series was based on me just knowing one person in particular, and that is my good friend, Garrett Reisman, who I met when I was in college, and Garrett is the smartest person I've ever met in my life. And after college, Garrett had this job he wanted. It's a tough job to get in the history of humanity. Only a couple hundred people have got this job, but Garrett worked hard, he got it. Here's Garrett at work a couple years ago. He became an astronaut, and it was so cool for me to have a friend who's an astronaut. When you have a friend who's an astronaut, you can go visit them at the Johnson Space Center, do astronaut training. I got front row seats every time Garrett blasted off into space. This is one of his space shuttle launches. And one of the coolest things is that your friend who's an astronaut, they can take your stuff into space for you. So Garrett was going to space. He made me this amazing offer to take some things of mine into space. So I had just received my very first copy of Belly Up, my very first book, and I sent this into space. And to prove it, Garrett took it out of storage one day, put it up against the window of the International Space Station, and took this photograph. This is not Photoshop. That's Belly Up with the actual Earth in the background. And then he emailed me this photograph from space. So that's the coolest email I ever got in my whole life. I was so excited. I forwarded this email to every person I knew, including my publisher and my editor. They called me back very excited, said, wow, you know somebody, you know an astronaut. Why don't you write a book set in space based upon what you've learned by knowing an astronaut? So I had to think, well, what did I learn? I realized that I knew through Garrett what real space travel was like, but usually in the movies, they show you fake space travel. Like it's set very far in the future. This is a spacecraft from a pretty typical movie spacecraft. This is the USS Enterprise from Star Trek. It's bigger than your house. It's bigger than your school. Right? And spacecraft in the movies are getting ridiculous. This is a dreadnought from the most recent Star Wars movies. And it's half the size of Manhattan Island in New York City. We don't have a building we're that big on Earth, let alone something that can go warp speed travel. Our spacecraft are quite a bit smaller. This is an Apollo capsule. Now, if you go to the Science Center here in Los Angeles, you can see this very Apollo capsule. I know you can't go right now because of the pandemic, but soon it'll be open again. This capsule went to the moon. There were 3 astronauts inside this capsule for 10 days going to the moon. The people in front of it are not astronauts. They are 4th graders. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, you realize that if you're in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, you realize that capsule is not much bigger than you are. So, and you have to realize it's not all empty space in that capsule. It's full of all the machinery it took to keep the astronauts alive. So it's very tight in there. It's very cramped. Through Garrett, you can't get into this particular one, but I was able to get into a space capsule with Garrett somewhere else, and I could not believe how tiny and cramped it was inside. So, and you might notice that it's so tiny and cramped, you might be thinking, well, where's the bathroom in there? Well, the answer is there is no bathroom in a space capsule. You have to wear a space diaper, which they leave out of all the Star Wars movies. There's no point in a Star Wars movie where Luke or Leia says, well, I got to go change my space diaper. I'll be right back. But so I thought, if I want to write something set in space, I don't want to do it in this distant future where all of our issues with space travel have been taken care of. I want to do it in the near future. This is a future you will live to see, 2041. You guys might get the chance to go into space for work or even as tourists. And I wanted to play up what the realities of space travel are going to be like. Then I thought if I put a kid into that world, that would be a fascinating world. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about where the ideas for all my series came from, but I did want to talk about Spy School. If I based the Fun Jungle series on knowing zookeepers and biologists, and I based the Moonbase Alpha series on knowing an astronaut, I would love to tell you that when the time came to write Spy School, I just called up my friend who was a secret agent and said, hey, what's it like being a secret agent? But I don't have a friend who's a secret agent, or maybe I do. How would I know? Because they are a secret agent. The word secret is right in the title. There's not that many other jobs with secret in the title. There's no secret doctors or secret lawyers or secret farmers, but there's secret agents, and a secret agent cannot even tell their own family members what they do for a living. And I thought this was a fascinating job. I wanted to write about it. The only secret agent I knew was this guy, James Bond. Now, I don't know if you've seen a James Bond movie. There've been quite a few James Bond movies recently with Daniel Craig. They've been quite good. There's the Mission Impossible movies out now with Tom Cruise. There've been a lot of good spy movies lately. When I was a kid, before streaming, you could only see the one movie that was in the theater. And for me, this was the only James Bond movie that was out. It's a James Bond movie called Moonraker, which is generally regarded as the worst James Bond movie they ever made. They sent James Bond to space. If this looks like a cheesy, ridiculous movie, you're right. It was pretty awful. But as a kid, I didn't know any better. I thought it was great. All my friends thought it was great. And we all ran around pretending to be James Bond. And because, again, I wanted to be an author, I went one step farther and I wrote what we would call fan fiction about James Bond. It's not a James Bond story. It's a Jimmy Bond story about James Bond's son. And it was while I was writing this story, when I was not much older than a lot of you watching right now, that I came up with the idea for a spy school. In this story, Jimmy Bond is not really a spy. He's pretending to be a spy. He wants to grow up and be like his dad. And I thought, well, maybe he's got to go to a top secret spy school to learn how to be a spy. Well, I told you guys that sometimes you have an idea for a very, very long time working on it. Well, this is my idea. I had it from the time I was your age until the time I got it published. That was quite a few years. And I had to work on this idea. I had it rejected quite a few times, but you know what? I stuck with it. I kept going with it, and it actually paid off. Not only do I have a series on this book, but I actually even have a movie deal for Spy School as well. It's set up at Disney Plus right now. We're trying to see if the pandemic has thrown a wrench into this, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll go from this to this sometime relatively soon. So now I do want to talk very quickly about Spy School Revolution, because not only do you have to come up with an idea for a series, but you have to come up with ideas for every book. And so I thought I'd tell you like maybe how one, even get the idea for one book. Back before the pandemic, I would travel around the country talking to schools in person, and I happened to be in the Virginia suburbs near Washington, D.C. And I was going to schools, but I had a little break in the day, and I realized I was very close to a place called Mount Vernon. So I decided to go over and visit Mount Vernon. I'd always wanted to go there. It is a colonial estate. It looks exactly the way it did over 250 years ago when it was owned by this man. So Mount Vernon is the home of George Washington. Once he stopped being president, he spent the rest of his life there. He barely ever left there again. And while I was there, I was talking to the people who worked there. I mentioned that I wrote this spy school series, and they got very excited. And they said to me, do you know that George Washington was the very first spy master of the United States? Well, that was news to me. I knew he was our first president. I knew he was the first commander of our armed forces. I didn't know that he was our first spy master. And so that was exciting to me. I started talking to them. They started giving me all this information about Washington's spy ring, and I was doing all this research about it. I found out Washington ran an amazing spy ring, and his spies they didn't necessarily invent things, but they used techniques that we would still see as being familiar today for spies. They had secret codes. This is a secret code that Washington's spies actually devised and used during the Revolution. They had invisible ink. It didn't work the same way an invisible ink might work for us now, but it worked awfully well. And so they used invisible inks. They used all these amazing techniques. They were so effective. They were actually really key in the defeat of the British in the American Revolution. There were British spies who said that Washington didn't really outfight them so much as he outspied them. Washington lost more battles than he won as a general, but he was an excellent spy master. And if it hadn't been for his spy network, who knows, we might be living in a very different country today. So I thought, man, that's really interesting. Maybe I could write a spy school book set in the modern day, like all my other books, take the same characters I've had, but tie them into something that the original spy master, George Washington, discovered. So I went from that spark of an idea, and then I played around with lots of other ideas, and that is what ultimately became Spy School Revolution. So I'm about to take questions. I want to talk very quickly about the books I have coming out this year. I have 3 more books coming out this year, starting with only a couple of weeks from now, Charlie Thorne and the Lost City, which is the second Charlie Thorne book in that series, where Charlie Thorne is on the track of something very mysterious and dangerous that Charles Darwin discovered while he was traveling around the world working on the theory of evolution. if you like the Fun Jungle series, Bear Bottom comes out in May. That, as you may be able to tell, is a mystery that involves a grizzly bear. And then for the Spy School fans out there, the 9th book in that series will come out at the end of summer, and that is Spy School at Sea. All right, so that is my presentation there. And so I am now going to stop sharing my screen, and it is time for me. I may have answered some questions that kids have, but I think there's still quite a few more questions that I can answer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gibbs. I have a couple of questions that from our students here and also from LA Unified. So first question is from, let's see, Layla Claiborne in Miss Willingham's class at Bunch Elementary School. If you were a spy, what job would you like? A field spy, a tech spy, or an HQ telling all data spy, and why?
Wow, okay, first of all, that is the most involved, you really know your spies there. I think having worked very hard on the spy series and seeing that being a field agent is very, very difficult. I don't think I would be cut out for that. So I think it would probably be more along my lines of expertise to be the tech spy, I think.
Great, thank you. And we have Madeline Camacho from Laurel Street Elementary School in Miss Ortiz's class. Where to get information or ideas for your books? And I think you briefly mentioned that to us already. And also, what do you like most about your own writing?
Oh, what I like? Well, okay. Well, first of all, where I get, so yes, I did say that I like to get ideas by talk. I love to interview people about my ideas and to get information. And I like to tell kids that a lot of the time kids seem to think that maybe nobody will talk to them if they wanted to do research because they're a kid. But I have actually found that people probably are more willing to talk to you if you're a kid. And so when I was doing, say, a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and I went to the Natural History Museum here to talk to the fossil curators, I brought my kids along, and I think we got to spend the entire day there because I was there with my kid. I think if I had just come by myself, I would have gotten maybe an hour or two, but because I brought my kids and they were so excited to talk to them, we spent an entire day there. You can get ideas from visiting places. You can get ideas from reading books and magazines. There are so many different, you can call, you can track down specialists and call them up and interview them. So there's lots of different ways to get information. And when I was being asked, the second question was, what do I like most about the writing? I do find that doing the research is a lot of the time the most fun. This job allows me to meet just an amazing variety of people. And just here in Los Angeles, we're really surrounded by just so many incredible people. I've gone to SpaceX headquarters, which is in Hawthorne. I've gone to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is up in La Cañada. I do research at the zoo. There's just all these amazing places to go. And so that's a really fun part of the job, is actually getting to meet people and talk to people and do research.
Thank you. And Margaret Lopez from Mr. Yock's class in Foster Elementary School. What was the most challenging thing that occurred while writing Spy School?
Most challenging thing? Well, okay. Well, I guess just in general, I sort of alluded to this, that, it took me a long time to get to sell that idea. And sadly, that's not that uncommon because being a writer is an interesting job. I don't know how many of you out there have ever thought about being a writer, but a lot of people get the idea. You can try out being a writer when you're even your age, right? You can say, oh, I'm going to write a story. Now a lot of people can't try out their future career at such a young age. Garrett Reisman couldn't go into space when he was in second grade and say, oh, I like this, I'm going to be an astronaut. Or you can't, do surgery and say, oh, I like this, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. Please don't do surgery on anybody at your age, guys. But you can write a story. And so I think a lot of the time, people say, oh, I like this, like I can try this job, I can try and get published now. And the truth is that, it takes practice to be a writer. And so I tried to get published when I was very young, and it didn't work out for me. And I got rejected. And that, I know quite a few other writers, and most everybody got rejected. I heard you guys might have met with Jeff Kinney. I know Jeff, I think he says Diary of a Wimpy Kid was rejected something like 35 times, maybe more. It's not uncommon to have that rejection, and it stinks. Rejection is awful. But what you have to realize is that if everybody quit after they got rejected the first time, there wouldn't really be any books in your bookstore, in your library, in your house. There would be no Diary of a Wimpy Kid. There would be no Spy School. Very few authors got published on their first shot. It takes time and effort and sticking with it to make that happen.
And we have another question from Dejan Travis from Roosevelt Elementary School in Miss Orlango's class. Do you remember the first book you ever read as a kid?
The first book I ever read, yes, actually I do. The first book I ever read was The Cat in the Hat, and I actually, it's almost maybe my first memory is actually real, because I would look through it over, and one day I just realized I was reading it instead of just looking at the pages, and I went running around the house saying, like, I can read this book, I can read this book.
Oh, great. And then I have a couple of students with their hands up.
Okay, sure.
So I'm going to unmute Andrew Chavez.
Okay.
Andrew, unmute yourself. What was your question?
Yeah, I have a question. How many days does it take for you to actually make one entire book completely?
Oh, how many? Well, boy, I tend to think of it not in terms of days, but in terms of months or years. So I should say that when I start out with a book, I kind of allude to the fact that I spend a lot of time working on ideas before I start writing them. So I actually start on yellow pads like this, and I fill up these yellow pads with ideas, and eventually start turning them into like outlines. And so this I have yellow pads everywhere, all through my office, full of ideas for different books. And so that I might be doing that for a long time before I actually sit down and start writing. When I actually sit down and start writing, it takes me about 3 to 6 months to write the first draft of a book. And then this is the part your teachers like, where I tell you that after you do the first draft, you're not finished. You have to do another draft and another draft and another draft. So I do somewhere between 8 and 10 drafts for a book, which is probably on the low end for an author. I have author friends who tell me they do up to 40 drafts of a book. So so that whole process, from the time I start writing the book until that book comes out in the bookstore, is about maybe 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. A couple of more questions. Stephanie, can you unmute yourself and you could ask your question?
What was your favorite book as a child? Like, what was your favorite book when you were a kid?
Okay, yeah, my favorite. Actually, hold on. I'm gonna walk away for 2 seconds here, and I wanted to go get it because I had it right over there. Which is, here it is. It's The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. Which is,
like, what was your favorite?
I'm sorry. There was a little feedback there, so I think I was asking. Was there a follow up to that question?
No, I think she said, what was your favorite book as a child?
Right, yeah. So not only was my favorite book as a kid, but I still reread this book a lot because it's a wonderful mystery, and I can still learn from reading this mystery and seeing how well Ellen Raskin wrote this book.
Great. Okay, one more question. Let's see. I have Nicholas. Can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
I wanted to ask, why do you think an author as a job would like suit you? Like, why are you so interested in the job of being an author?
Oh, okay. So why was I so interested in the job of being an author? I think it goes back to the idea that I just liked writing as a kid, and that it was like my hobby. I like just sitting down and writing stories. And so the idea that this could be a job that like you could grow up and just keep doing this for your whole life was really exciting to me. Although I should point out that there are other ways to make a living as a writer than being an author. And that was a discovery I made when I was in college. And so, and I did a lot of those. I wrote for newspapers. I wrote for the movie business. I wrote for the television business. And I have other friends who write for magazines, who write for Broadway shows, who write for the television news, who, there are many ways to be a writer, and you can actually kind of even jump around between them. I now that I've been publishing novels, it is my favorite thing to do, and I like writing novels more than I like write. But I wrote the screenplay for the Spy School movie. Sometimes I like to even do something besides writing books. So there's lots of other options out there to be a writer besides just writing books.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. I know we have so many more questions, but because of time, we're going to end it here. But students and teachers, we have another surprise for you. Access Books is actually purchasing over 500 books, Mr. Gibbs's books, and it'll be handed to you guys at your school. So thank you again for joining today. And thank you, Mr. Gibbs. On behalf of Compton Unified School District, I would like to thank you and Dr. Constantino here, I know she's here somewhere, and Ms. Lori Kempner and the entire team at Access Books for making today possible. And I think our superintendent is here still, I'm not sure. Dr. Brawley, are you here?
I am here.
Yes. So that is our superintendent of Compton Unified School District.
Simply want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for everything that you've done for Compton Unified School District, the partnership, as well as the additional partners that you bring on. Stuart, I'd like to say thank you today for taking the time to share your experience with our students and show how the creative process actually gets unlocked to create, period. And unique to just writing, the same process really applies to anything that you put your mind to. So once again, thank both of you. Appreciate it very much.
May I add one thing?
Yes.
First, I want to shout out to all our LAUSD students who are here. We love you, and we're so excited that you could join. But Stuart, I was wondering if you could just end with one thing. I'm just thinking that during this pandemic, writing is a good way to release emotions and frustration and some anxiety. And perhaps you could give the kids a few pointers about writing just to feel better during this time.
Oh, all right. Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say that you're absolutely right. And this is kind of this is a frustrating time for everybody. And I think all the kids out there should know that if you feel annoyed or feel like the world has handed you a bad deal right now, that's a completely legitimate feeling, I think, right. So writing, certainly as a kid is a good way to express yourself, to put things out there in the world. Sometimes people talk about having writer's block and not knowing what they want to write. But if sometimes when I come to schools, I can say like, okay, here's what you do. You just set a timer and you just write for 5 minutes. And really anybody can sit down and just write for 5 minutes if you don't get all caught up in whether it's good, what story, just let your ideas flow. And you might be really surprised how much you can write if you just say, it doesn't matter if they don't get caught up in, is this good, is this bad, just I'm just gonna write and see what it is. So yeah, I mean, look, it's certainly, there's so many things that you can't do right now. Writing is one of the things that you can do. All you need is a pen and some paper, and you can do that. I did want to say, because I know there are other kids with their hands up. If you still have questions, there's still ways that you can ask me a question. If with permission, you can go to my website, which is just stuartgibbs.com. There is a frequently asked questions page there, and there is if you don't find your question answered on that page, there is an email address on that page that you can write to me, and I will do my best to try and get back to you as soon as I can. So. I know. I'll say this also about the pandemic. Hopefully, the vaccines are rolling out. Maybe by in a couple months, this will all be kind of a memory for us, and you'll be back to having authors actually be able to come to your schools. And Access Books runs some great programs, and it'd be great to get those going again as well.
And also to all of our administrators and teachers, thank you for bringing your students on today. I think they got a lot out of this process. And thanks for everything that you do.
Bye. Thank
it.
you.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Bye.
Mr. Gibbs.
Bye.
Dr.
Have a good day,
Brawley,
everyone.
thank you. Thank you. Yes.